Good evening, everyone. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung, and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. We welcome any First Nations viewers who are joining us this evening and pay our respects to all First Nations peoples across Australia, to their ancestors and elders, and to our shared future. My name is Brandon Pape. I'm the Artistic Director for Antipodes Theatre Company. We are so thrilled to be hosting tonight's event in collaboration with the Clocktower Center and Moonee Valley City Council. They have generously supported the development of a project we are so excited to be planning to present as part of Midsummer Festival 2021. This is a new play development, and it's titled Sam I Am, written and performed by Sam Martin, one of tonight's panelists, and it outlines Sam's experiences growing up deaf and gay in the inner suburbs of Sydney. Tonight's talkback will be also uninterpreted. And we are very excited to have the panelists with us this evening. This discussion was born out of the development for Sam I Am. And Antipodes Theatre Company is committed to inclusive, collaborative storytelling. And this panel is an opportunity for us to explore accessible practices in the performing arts. What is working? What can be improved? And how do we move forward in our current climate? Joining me this evening are creatives with a wealth of knowledge and experience in different areas of the arts, some of whom are part of the creative development of Sam I Am. And throughout tonight's discussion, we invite viewers to submit questions in the comments section that we may bring in and address with the group. So without further ado, we want to bring on tonight's panelists. The goal of this evening is to explore how we shape the creative process for artists with disability, how to build and enable safe spaces for artists and audiences, and how the arts sector is and can meaningfully contribute to a more accessible and inclusive society. So our first panelist is Ana Maria Belo. Anna is an actor, writer, director, and producer across theater and film who also works with deaf children as an ambassador for the Shepherd Center in Sydney. Welcome, Anna. Oh, Anna, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I am.
No, that's okay. We're learning. This is a first for us. So obviously technical difficulties will abound, but Anna, we're thrilled to have you with us tonight. You are serving as dramaturg for Sam I Am, which we'll talk more about in a bit, but tell us about some of the other projects you've been working on recently.
Well, before COVID hit, I was supposed to be doing the Dolly Parton musical 9 to 5. So I should be in Brisbane right now doing a big show, but COVID. So in that time, this is now my studio. So this is where I've been teaching acting from. I've been running classes from here. I've been writing and creating my own projects. I mean, I think I'm trying to think when was the last time I was even on stage. I think that was back in January. But as an actor, I've been on stage back in January. Oh no, I did a TV show. I did Bump, which is about to come out on Stan in December. So I'm looking forward to that.
Fabulous. Well, we're so excited to have you, and we'll bring you back on in a bit. But first, we're going to introduce our next panelist. So the next panelist we have joining us this evening is Michael Chan. Michael recently toured internationally with Back-to-Back Theater's production of The Shadow Whose Prey the Hunter Becomes, and also serves as a disability advisor. Welcome, Michael.
Good pleasure having with you, Brandon.
Michael, tell us a little bit about what the last few months have been like for you.
Well, but if it wasn't a pandemic, as I mentioned, I meant to be continue touring across Europe all year round with a back-to-back for this latest production. So actually, which is really holding me back very recently, I should say. So I've been all year ever since March, which is got all the tour plan, everything. So in the last in the last couple of few months, I actually been doing something more particularly different, besides, isolating at home during a pandemic, spending a lot more quality time with my parents. We're actually doing the baking, cooking, and even doing exercising, and then keeping close contact with all my friends and the acquaintances and everything through social media like Facebook or something. And I did a bit of getting a sense of developing my storytelling and creative writing skills, because I've been took part of called My Story Project through City of Greater Geelong. So I actually have just been sharing my own personal and inspiring stories, in which, well, when I was grew up as a child, and I actually had just begin to realize that I begin to developing and nurturing my own talents and strengths, which is part of my natural passion, which is acting and performing arts and everything. So, and now they just recently created a short film, which is be appeared on the Geelong Australia website, and actually I did offer some more casting acting opportunities. So I even work as an extra for them or the future TV programs and shows, in which I hope to be able to sign on and actually seek some more performance opportunities. Even comes towards early next year, towards 2021, I might be able to continue perform my future production or even shows as I could. Well, just even never stop to continue learn a bit more, and never stop, never give up all my dreams and aspirations. So, yeah, continue to develop my natural passion for all the acting and performing arts I'll be working on, and even begin to work in my own personal projects, personal based projects, which I'll presume be able to continue on.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Michael. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Our next panelist is Daniel Graham. Dan is a theater director who advocates for artists with neurodiverse disability and was recently announced as a finalist in the Disability Leadership Institute's National Awards for 2020. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Brandon. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you? I know. Dan, in spite of having several jobs and events canceled during this past year, you've been staying busy throughout the pandemic. How has this pandemic influenced or affected your work?
As I was saying to you earlier on, Brandon, before we all came online, I think it's very interesting that what's for someone who actually is not the best with technology at the best of times, Zoom I saw as an enemy, and it's suddenly become a really good friend. And AG, that's how we made contact in regards to the winter development retreat for Antipodes. And I came on board as the access consultant on that. And as a byproduct, I mentioned Sam I Am, and we are here tonight. And I think it's just been very interesting that, as you said, like so many others and everyone else has mentioned, opportunities have gone by the wayside due to COVID. For example, I was meant to have a directing residency back at the Globe Theatre in London, following on a Create New South Wales fellowship, which I actually had last October, which took me all over meeting the major theatre companies to discuss what access needs they had in place for artists with a disability, specifically those with a neurodiversity. So yes, it's very disappointing, and it's been postponed till we get back to, inverted commas, the new normal, whatever that's going to be. But it's also opened opportunities such as what we're discussing now. And I've always seen myself, and I only had this discussion with someone earlier on this week, I see my directing work and someone who identifies having a disability, neurodiversity, my access work as equal importance. So basically, I may not have been in a rehearsal room, like what Ana Maria was just saying about herself. Like, I literally had our first week of development on a project that I've got on Bill Shakespeare, dealing with neurodiversity in Shakespeare. But by saying that, it has actually widened actually to a world focus. Like, I'm going to discuss them all later on, but ISPA, which is the International Society of Performing Arts Conference, which is usually held in New York every January, which I went 2 years ago, have invited me to, very similar to what we're having here, but convey one a discussion on accessibility and for artists with a disability. So you take the good with the good, so to speak. And hopefully we can not just change people's minds tonight, but inform them about what actually, we've got a number of great, talented individuals here who so happen to have a disability. So that's my hope for tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I think your insights have taught me a lot. We have gotten to meet over and get to know each other over the last few months. So
we still haven't met in person.
That's true. Only heads on a screen. Well, thank you, Dan. We'll bring you back on in a little bit. Our final panelist tonight is the writer and director of Sam I Am, Sam Martin. Sam is an alumni of the Australian Film, TV, and Radio School with an aspiring passion for creating and supporting diversity within the arts, media, and performance spaces. Welcome, Sam.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Brandon, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Sam, as part of this development process for Sam I Am, you've been having weekly meetings over Zoom with Ana Maria, our dramaturg. What has it been like working virtually for you? What are some of the advantages and disadvantages that you found?
Oh, great question, Brandon. I think the first main point and the first advantage I'd really want to speak about is me. I'm living actually in Melbourne and Anna lives in Sydney, so there's quite a big distance, and obviously we're online doing all this. We can't meet face to face, but obviously the online platforms really helped us both, and also it's been really flexible as well. So we're both at home, we're in our comfortable safe spaces going through this experience, and we've had some really in-depth personal hard-hitting discussions. So I know that if I was doing this elsewhere, I wouldn't feel as comfortable as I am at home where I'm doing them. So that's always a positive about that. And maybe one disadvantage, I do love face-to-face meetings with people. That's what I love to do. So because Anna as well is also deaf, we both have hearing losses. So, you know, we have different communication needs. So sometimes face-to-face is actually better for us to be able to communicate. But it's been really beneficial, mostly advantages. It's been great experiences working with Anna throughout this creative process.
That's fantastic. So give us a moment. We're going to bring everyone back on, and we will have 2 interpreters that we will rotate throughout the evening. So you'll get to meet our second interpreter. So if we can bring everyone on. All right. Let's jump right in with a key aspect of why we've gathered everyone here this evening. Why is it important to address accessibility in our work as artists, either in performance or in its content? Anna, let's start with you.
I think it's fundamental. I think it's so fundamental. I mean, like, just to be completely frank, I was doing a show, I won't say where, but it was a very big show, very big theatre. And I realized to get from the dressing room to the stage, you had to be able-bodied. And I just actually sat there and I went, if you went through the foyer, there would be disabled toilets, there would be, you know, you have wheelchair access, you would have a ramp, you would be able to get into your seat. But there is no way you would be able to get a wheelchair-bound performer on stage. And that blew my mind. And I think that's something that I don't know, I guess we take for granted. And not just in that aspect, in all aspects. I feel that disability, because of, I think it comes down to a lot of things, how it's tested, how it's labeled, that everybody needs to fit into a box. And because there are so many people saying, oh, you're this, you have this wrong with you, you fit into this box, and I only deal with people with that disability like this. But the box is very big and very different, and every box is shaped so differently depending on who the person is. Like, for example, you have Sam and myself, two deaf people, but our needs are completely different. And I think that that's something that that conversation doesn't happen. So I think when writers are creating these characters, I encourage writers to do more and more research, and I encourage producers to do more and more research, and I encourage casting directors to do more and more research, because honestly, sometimes that just doesn't happen. And like, with all best intention, like, I know people are coming at it with great hearts and wanting the best for everybody, but I just feel that there isn't a cookie cutter answer to different disabilities. There just isn't one, with it. The same with able-bodied people. You were to have an able-bodied actor looking at a role, they're going to have different needs. Like, everyone has their own different needs, but I feel like with disability, it's seen as a negative constantly. And I feel, okay, I will say this. So with the masks and everybody having to use masks, that impacted me greatly. I lip read 99% of the time, even though I wear my hearing aids. But people go, but you've got hearing aids. Why can't you hear? Like, why is that affecting you? But I do need to see someone's face. So when I am on set or working with people, it's the thing is, when, as an actor and as a performer and as somebody in the industry, you're so, oh God, I didn't think I was going to get emotional, but now I am. My goodness. And it's only 17 minutes in.
It's only the first question.
I know. First question, and I'm already going. So the thing is, there aren't many jobs out there. So when you do get one, you're trying to do your best. You don't want to put anybody out. You don't want to feel like a burden. You're doing all of these things. So I know for me, like, I overcompensate. So I'm not just listening out. I'm having to read body language. I'm having to work out, okay, when is my cue? It's not just on a word. I'm trying to watch, okay, the shoulders have gone up and down. I know he's finished talking, and now I can enter. So it's really difficult when somebody comes over and says, oh, do you want me to just give you a cue? I'll just tap you on the shoulder. And you're like, no, it's okay. I'll work it out. It's fine. I can do that. But then when you actually do go, hey, I'm gonna need a cue here, getting an eye roll or okay, like, that doesn't make things great. So that's very difficult. So I do think it is important to just say, hold on, what can we do to make this easier for you? Because it is tiring on our senses, on everything, and it is for so many different people, even able-bodied people. My goodness, we spend such a long day rehearsing and such a long day on set. It's tiring for anybody. So I do think it's important. I think it's fundamental to say, hold on, what does every single person need? That was a really long answer. I'm sorry, Brandon.
That was fabulous. Does anybody else have any thoughts about how we address accessibility in the arts or in your work as an artist?
Brendan, if I can say something on those lines, being a person who identifies in a disability, who happens to be a director, and the director of Sam I Am, it all is related to what I'm going to say here. I actually came to Sam with the idea of us working on this project because, as you know, we had the original showing of it at Brand X, Flying On, who've been absolutely fantastic in Sydney. Actually, I worked out it's actually this week last year. So, as I said to Sam, happy anniversary, my friend. Anyway, I thought it was very interesting that basically, I think it's just what you, Ana Maria, said, that basically every need is individual. And also, I think I can speak for everyone in this space, almost in this room, we have had to overcompensate if that makes sense. Like prove ourselves over and over again. Like the reason why I was so interested in working with Sam was for someone who, and this is another thing, I don't do exclusively disability theatre, but obviously my disability, and we're going to talk about this more later on tonight, the intersectionality, like my queerness, is also part of me as well, obviously. But I came to Sam that basically I had not seen disability, deaf, whatever you want to call it, and I'm waiting for people to send messages on Facebook. I've not seen the intersectionality of a personal story of someone from those worlds who also, if I can put my hand up here, who was also the director themselves had a disability, if that makes sense. So it was very important that by it not being political, but Sam may disagree with this, it has become political just by its very reason, it's very being, if that makes sense. And as much as Sam has said he has trusted me, I felt I had to trust Sam as well, if that makes sense. Like we both had, and just what Emily said, both of us had a lot of things in common, but also our differences and our similarities had to be trust from day one. And as I said, a year later, we're in a position with help with Emily and obviously you, Brendan, and hopefully with COVID going away next year, having it at midsummer next year. So this will be a conversation that not just will start now, will continue. And as Emily said, be casting directors, obviously I'm from a theatre background, theatre companies, etc. It's, to me, and I'm being political here, to me it is a long due over conversation that should have been done some time back. But hopefully by having us in this virtual room and other artists with a disability in a room, you would not just have true diversity. I just said to someone again the other day, the sad thing is, what I think is so funny is there are so many stories that are out there to be told. Our story, Sam's and our story, and it's Sam's story, but you know what I mean, it's just one story. We are not unique as much as we're unique, but we're not unique. And it doesn't necessarily, I think what makes Sam I Am so powerful, and talking to Marie, the work she's doing with Sam, yes, it will deal with Sam's deafness as well as him being gay, but it's basically, it could be universal. A lot of the themes that are brought up, it's not the deaf show, it's not the gay show, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and that's my hope.
Absolutely. We've received a great question from Sigrid, but before we get to that, Sam, I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about. So we know sort of, in a production and performance perspective, how accessibility is important for allowing people to access the work, both as whether as actors or creatives or as audience. Tell us a little bit about your process bringing your story to the stage, because it directly addresses your experience.
Mm.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good question. I was just thinking for myself, and who I am as a deaf person who has got a disability as well as an artist, that I feel like I've got a responsibility for the community to make sure that I have accessibility for myself, and it's clear for everybody else who also needs that same accessibility. Sorry, just 1 minute. I'm just adjusting my camera. I really think that we just need to be clear about the advocacy, what our aim is and who we're targeting for. Because I accept responsibility for my own involvement in the community, but also we just need to accept that other people need access and advocacy as well, the same people that are involved in this show. It needs to be clear for everybody else who needs accessibility. And I think that as artists, in this industry, in the arts and creative industry, as well as the audience, we need to make sure that everybody is allocated for. And we also need to make sure that directors and writers and casting agents and everybody else accepts that they need that sort of accessibility as well. And so hopefully we've got deaf access, here tonight. I know it's clear for me, but I've just been curious about how other people are accessing tonight. So when we made Sam I Am, we were thinking about the different needs of everybody. So for example, live captioning. You know, last year we had live captioning as well. But also we need to make sure that there are wheelchair access for people who use that wheelchair. But also there are many, many other different types of accessibility needs that we might not be sure of. So for example, blindness as well. So we need to make sure that everything is accounted for. And so I think that last year, so the person who's making the play, so Andrew, he worked tirelessly on gathering up information and negotiating and making sure that there were live captions, making sure that there were TV screens available, making sure that there was a person that was linking with all the sound, just to make sure that everything was so accessible for all of us. And my performance as a deaf, and we had an interpreter as well for that performance, meaning that there was interpreters for myself and for the hearing audiences, so everybody was accounted for. And it's not easy, but it was a really important experience, and we worked tirelessly on it. And I think that it is incredibly important, not just working hard, because all of us just to show and to prove that we can show that there is access in this sort of industry, in this sort of field. And also, me personally, I just believe that the access is not the responsibility of the person that needs. It's really exciting and new and creative and challenged to create that automatically for the people who need it. So I think that we all in the arts industry, whether you've got a disability or not, it is your responsibility to make sure that every single performance is accessible for everybody who is watching, for everybody who is involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Really quick before we move on to the next question, Michael, you have been involved as well in the creation of work. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that process was like for you, being involved in creating something that that you were able to contribute to the creation, not only the performance and how that connects to accessibility, but the actual content of what you were working on? Oh, Michael, did we lose you? I think all of a sudden you might be frozen. Oh.
Yeah.
Nope. There we go.
Actually,
could you hear my question?
Okay, repeat the question,
okay,
please. Yeah. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, just
yes, I can hear you.
Your experience generating the content for the piece.
Yeah. Well, actually, for that particular we're doing is created and then being co-written or even devised by the ensemble of the unique actors with disabilities ourselves. Well, because we will be able to share some other unique and or personal stories and perspectives which are put into some kind of ideas and experimentation to write some kind of maybe a breakthrough piece that put into the show, because of the fact that by that time actually I go for audition for the particular role, and actually I wasn't originally offered for the role to take part in this production. So actually I just simply, well, they've already started and co-writing the play or even a storyline of a production themselves back in 2017, which is quite a while actually. So, well, then I realized that once I've been jumping and being part among the ensemble, which is taking part of the production, which we've been working on since last year probably. So that actually just simply we heard some kind of a lot of untold stories that we actually share, because how does the treatment of people with disabilities and actually that affected all the people or even the wider community, even the fact that what does a discrimination and even some kind of maybe treatment of people with disabilities means to them, just trying to be more inclusiveness and even accessibility, in which try to make them feel more welcoming, and the fact that just try to, well, having a sense of inclusiveness, a sense of place which have been offered them, given some a bit more some safer space for them. So even they just simply went and try to contribute themselves, or actually, but they have the chance to take some decision-making process in which would benefits to them. So even one of the most untold stories been heard that back in 2013, because in the state of Iowa in America, where I couldn't imagine more than 30 men with intellectual disabilities were actually being forced to undergoing the slavery, labor slavery in the turkey processing plant, which is where one of my authors have been sharing that story. So, which is a belief that what telling truly, there's some kind of pretty untold stories in which putting some kind of an agenda in which even just simply what does that mean to them, and even how be able to speak about the rights and or them try to advocating for themselves, in which what some kind of the treatment, whether being bullied or even just making sense of, even which what doesn't make them feel right or even accountable towards them within widely diverse community, where there's so many unexpected events that may occurring. So even just simply, if it doesn't feel not right for them, actually have to speak for themselves, among themselves anyway. So we're giving some participatory rights for them, and just simply be able to speak to them. So that's what we've been creating some kind of most breakthrough pieces that I've been doing to the audience a chance to hear some amazing stories, and in fact put all their shame and also kind of different reactions from people who be willing to just gain a lot more some stronger voices which be able to speak up within the community and make some issues and the recommendations, in which hopefully just try to speak for themselves, and hopefully to make some informed decisions and taking control for themselves within their lives. So I hope they won't be able to be undervalued or even overlooked all the time.
That is so fascinating. I'm from Iowa. For anyone that doesn't know, and I had no idea. And I think that you bring up a really good point, Michael, that it is not, it is everyone's responsibility. I think, Sam, you mentioned this, to do the research, and Anna, you as well, to do the work, but to allow these stories to be heard is so important, because it is one facet of learning about opening the gates for accessibility and being able to really absorb that for people in a much larger context than just the performing arts, that it relates to how we view accessibility in our daily lives, and how that those cues we start to pick up on, everywhere we go. That's so fabulous. We're going to do a little interpreter switch. Welcome back, Marnie. I'm going to throw a curveball at everyone. It's only the second question, but Sigrid has asked, how can we support or incentivize artists and arts workers to create work which has access built in for both participants and audiences? And then there's a follow-up. Also, what targeted support does the arts industry need to upskill in this area? For example, technical sound lighting crews being confident in providing the right environment to enable access. Who wants to take that on? Sam.
I would love to start. Can we go back to the first part of Sigrid's question on the bottom, if that's possible? Perfect. Okay, just so I can have a quick read. So my experience with organising interpreters, for example, plus organising live captions, for example, for Sam I Am last year, was quite difficult, and it was quite a lot of hard work. We had to fundraise to have enough money to pay for both the interpreters, live captions, accessibility. We had to organise the interpreters and all that, but organising live captions, that was just a whole nother realm for me. We really needed to hire, we had to have TV screens on the stage as well as having a person live captioning as well, and making sure that person who was live captioning could hear everything clearly to caption it correctly. So we need to have more awareness, I think, about the process to make sure it's successful and what's involved. So I think we need to really unpack that so we can understand what is needed to make things successful. From a broader kind of context, generally speaking, with the arts industry, we need that kind of understanding and awareness and the process and what needs we provide, accessibility and all that kind of stuff. And also theatre companies and theatre performance spaces need to have that awareness as well. So it's people as well as places. And I think it's all about awareness when it comes down to it. It's really about understanding and practice, setting up good practices so we understand what we need to do and what the process is to do each of them in order for accessibility to be completely successful for all. So yeah, that's what we really need to do as an arts industry. We need to, and also it's a separate context as well, from audience as well as people who are being involved, cast and crew within a performance.
Anna.
I'd just like to add on to that. I think what Sam said is absolutely right. I think awareness is extremely important, but I feel like it's specific awareness, because everyone goes, yeah, I know there are deaf people. Yeah, I know there are disabled people. Yeah, I know, but they don't know what that entails. And so I think everyone like working within the theatre is going, oh, yes, we have wheelchair users coming in. Oh, yes, we have a deaf group coming in that need to sit on the left side to watch the interpreter. Yes, they know all that. But when there is a deaf performer, a wheelchair user, a disabled performer, that conversation is still not being had. So I think in terms of what can we do to support, it's not just awareness, it's education. And I think we're in an age right now where there kind of isn't an excuse. There kind of isn't an excuse because we can, like I can find out what you had for lunch yesterday if I really wanted to, I can just stalk that. But we don't go, hold on, what do I need to learn about other people and their needs? Very quick example, when the bushfires were on last year and all the emergency services, all the emergency announcements were happening, there was an Auslan interpreter standing there at every single press conference. But depending on which channel you watched, they had zoomed in and cropped out the Auslan interpreter. And it's like, how many deaf people do you think are at that press conference? The Auslan interpreter is there for the people at home. So there was a group that was formed. There were a lot of messages put out. I called the union, got a whole bunch of things moving. If you read the comments that came up on the Facebook posts, it was amazing, because a lot of people went, yeah, just turn the captions on. Can't they just read? And on a good day, if you turn the captions on for your news, it's in gibberish, like the automated captions don't even make sense to a hearing person. So then trying to educate people and go, Auslan is not the same as English. And for a lot of older people who don't know, not just older people, but I know that was the main issue, who can't read those captions, English is not their first language. That was vital. There was vital information. So just things like that. So that thing of going, yeah, sure, we need to see the Auslan interpreter, but the cameraman was like, but this is a better shot. And this looks like a much better frame. So to get them to pull out and make sure that interpreter was there. When I watch the news on my dad's TV, and we can watch the Portuguese news, in the bottom corner, every news there is a Portuguese deaf interpreter on the screen. And I'm like, why don't we have that? Why don't we have that? We're very far away. So I think it's not just awareness, it's specific education.
Sorry, I just want to add one more little thing to what Anna just said. I think, Anna, you're absolutely spot on. We need to acknowledge that Australia is actually quite far behind within accessibility and inclusion. And also, I think a second point is we need to assume less, like you were saying, like, oh, they can just read the English. We actually need to ask people, have an open dialogue with the person asking what their accessibility needs is, what they need from us.
Absolutely. And I can even attest to that myself. Like I worked with a beautiful lady, Stacey, who's wheelchair bound, and I have never worked with anybody who is in a wheelchair, and I was her acting coach for a feature film that we did. And she is an activist, a speaker, but is not an actor. So my job was to train her up. And I thought, great, where can we rehearse? And she said, we need to rehearse here. And I went, well, okay, what do you need? And she said, well, I just need to make sure that it's a flat to get from the car into the studio. I went, yeah, great. Well, we can do this at my house. But then she said, no. The most important thing is a wheelchair accessible bathroom. And I just stopped and went, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Like all these things that we go, yeah. Like even I'm assuming I didn't know enough about what she needed. And look, we're all human. Absolutely. And we live in our own little bubble, and each person's bubble needs different things. We've got to have that conversation with every single person.
Michael, did you have a thought?
And I'd like to add, yeah, that's right. But actually, have again sense of some kind of community consultation and support, because maybe each and every individual are completely the same, because many artists with abilities and even art workers could possibly actually have shown a unique sense of perspective, a personal perspective, be able to share among the group, because they'll be able to have their voice, be able to heard of, and then they're trying to speak for themselves anyway. But actually, just simply look at their various disciplines in which some kind of inclusive and accessible practices that involves disability within the arts, in which certainly what like to involve, and just simply try to explore some questions around the issue, make them visible, revolved, some like a hesitancy of artists with disabilities to identify which contributes to the historic lack of collective voice in the theatrical world, and providing voice, I hope, the community for those artists and the art workers to work together to create some positive change and to make the huge difference within the field of arts and entertainment. So that's hopefully to explore. So they actually just try to be more responsive and be proactive through honest interaction and collaboration. So to ensure that the perceptions will be altered and the new ways of being and seeing one another being achieved. So hopefully we should start from top to bottom level, had to create something locally and share on some kind of a bigger scale. So could possibly be able to just sharing the new ideas and experiment on a global scale. So even a challenge themselves to perceive perceptions of a cultural landscape, be able to change, so reflecting on our reality on stage. So even those actors with disabilities be able to both participate and thrive on themselves. So we're actually just simultaneously creating some new methodologies to work on and allow us to take some more ownership for our personal and collective identity. Yeah, proud of ourselves.
Yeah, to just have it built in, like that's what we at ATC we've been trying to figure out ways that we can be it doesn't matter if we have a a deaf or hard of hearing actor or person on the crew, we, would ideally always send out a, something that enlists responses from the artists that we work with. Are there access needs? Are there, that we make that step before, people have to come to us. That's the ultimate goal, that we're figuring out how to build in, things that, we'll talk a little bit in a little bit about what is a safe space, but that's really what it is about. Dan, before we move on, do you want to, so in terms of arts workers, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about your work with the Media Entertainment Arts Alliance?
Yep, certainly. First of all, if I can just go back to something that Michael just said, which I will confirm what he was just saying. I think it's also interesting, and I think we've said this from the start of this conversation this evening, everyone is an individual, disability or otherwise. So I think that's the first thing to make clear I want to promote or put forward. And I think it's very interesting. I will use you as a good example, Brendan, that when we came on board in terms of me working for the winter retreat, and I did what I say out myself as having a disability, you straight away said to me, so what support do you actually need? What can we do to help? And that was, and I'm not just saying this, and we've become friends, so I'm not just saying it like that, but there was something freeing in that ownership was literally, I didn't have someone, because this is my personal experiences and a lot of the people in arts and disability who are the same thing. Either it's not made aware, it's not acknowledged what needs are or requirements are needed, or on the other spectrum, and it only happened to me, and this is so funny, in my early 40s, it still happens to me to this day, and probably will forevermore, that there are people, some people who don't have disabilities who feel they can represent people with disabilities. And I think that's something about that. I think we are starting to talk about safe spaces. Like I was actually, I try not to be too precious about it. Again, to quote Ana Maria, you don't want to be seen as difficult. But when I was at a particular event, which was actually talking about access requirements that I would need this coming week. And basically I was told that someone who I knew in the disability arts community who doesn't identify having a disability said, oh, look, I can be in that meeting. I can talk for Dan. I'm sorry, I'm quite capable of talking for myself. And that may not be always the case with everyone, but it's disability or not. But, I think and it gets back to what you were saying, Brendan, I think basically why I think we are such a great team, all of us here, in that basically what makes us unique makes us different, and what makes us different makes us unique, if that makes sense, which goes back to what you were asking me just a moment ago. I'm also the co-chair with the wonderful Kate Hood on the Media Entertainment Arts Alliance Disability Artists Committee. And basically we have, actually, Kate's been on it for a lot longer than I, and if you're watching, Kate, I mean that as a compliment, but it's basically seen that basically what we are discussing here, like bringing up the issues, what is actually seen as a right. It's not a demand, and even simple things like up to recently, and I would say this personally for the last couple of years, and I still, even a friend of mine said to me a couple of days ago, I have to stop doing it. I apologize for myself, if that makes sense. And I think it's basically the things like I always make a comment like in terms of even, and we're going to maybe mention up later on, maybe one of the elephants in the room tonight, the business about SIA. And obviously that does relate to me personally as someone who identifies as a neurodiversity. So that's personal to me. But in the sense that basically, give me 2 years ago, I would have been very much, and I'm serious when I say it's the second time I've come out of the closet, that I wouldn't have felt comfortable about being out there, and basically, when you see that things that basically, and this gets back to the advocacy work, e.g. Media Entertainment Alliance, productions I'm doing with Sam, Bill Shakespeare, etc., etc., I am seeing it basically as in a bigger picture, like, and you may wish to discuss it or not, Sam, a lot of the issues that you've discussed with me when we first met in terms of accessibility and it's something like Ana Maria was saying about the wheelchair toilet analogy. Basically, a lot of the accessibility issues Sam has had, I had 20 years ago. And I think it's shocking that basically here am I saying, like, I'm not saying everything can be perfect. We're not never going to have a perfect world, but I think it's very disheartening that a lot of the issues that I, as a student, and I said it, Sam, as a student, still were concerns or issues that Sam had. So, and I would just, I just say that and I'm sure Sam was the same, wasn't asking for the world, you know, and just like, yeah, so that's what I would add to that. And I would hope that basically, I think it's very important, like, e.g., arts access in Victoria, accessible arts here in New South Wales, etc., arts access Australia generally, you know, there are a lot of great people who are working with us, and I will put you in that category if I can, Brendan. But I think basically, can I just say bluntly, talk from a horse's mouth. Ask, like when you said to me, as I'm saying again, what actually do you think we need to discuss, Dan? That was one of the first times that I can remember in the setting we're talking now that someone had actually asked me outright what actually support is needed. So there was ownership for both me as an artist, and I would hope, you know, for Antipodes as well, that basically, so as you said, why can't there be a deaf member of crew? You know, there's no reason. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's key to think of things, you know, I mean, coming out of COVID, a big topic is, are we going to go back to the way things were? Or is this an opportunity to really reshape? And, you know, I think of it as like, you know, it's sort of grooves. You know, if we've been doing the same thing and we kind of are a bit stuck, it's, you know, I do think it's easier for us as a young company to be adapting and growing and with this, you know, newfound wave of really beautiful, necessary change. But for a lot of people, it's much more difficult because I think, you know, it's about not only shifting direct, you kind of have to like stop the ship before you can move in a different direction, whereas we're kind of, you know, maneuvering as we go. And I think, you know, I appreciate that, but I do think we as a company have so much more to learn, which is why we, you know, why tonight is so important.
But Brendan, sorry, but you even saying that, and I've said it a million times, but you even being aware of that, it is going, and I think I can say this, it not just you guys, but we're talking about the industry now, it is going to be messy. People are going to make mistakes. And Marie said, Vince, like what she said, I myself, like, have, as a director, you know, and I'm talking about people working with people with disability, have made mistakes. There are going to be mistakes made. It's just basically not just what you learn from them, but basically see that basically, like I think someone said to me the other day, we were talking about diversity, and they said to me, you do realize, I said to him, the funny thing about disability and diversity, it doesn't matter what other form of diversity a person has, disability is a uniform one. It doesn't matter if someone's from a culturally diverse background, sexuality, etc., gender, whatever, you know, it is that key link. So I would hope that basically we would basically, and this is me apologizing for myself again, I hope, and none of us are here to do this, this is not preaching, this is just trying to show that basically what is possible. It's not like, it's not demanding, and some people say it may sound demanding, or demands, if that makes sense. But as I said, like, there's, back to what I was saying about that person said they would speak for me. There may be someone with the same disability as me who may require that. and they should have absolutely right to have that. But back to what we were saying before, there's some things that I need assistance with, and I have to feel comfortable to know the people that I'm going to work with, e.g., this project being a prime example, are going to make me feel comfortable to actually discuss it. And I think that's the starting point, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a two-way street. We're just going to do a quick interpreter switch. So moving on, the next question I would like to pose to the group. What are some trends you've noticed recently or over time, here or overseas, that are contributing to making the arts more accessible for performers and audiences? What's the good stuff, right? What are we doing right? Michael, you recently toured the United States. You were supposed to tour Europe, I believe, before COVID. So do you want to talk about any comparisons or differences that you noticed between how accessibility is approached here versus elsewhere?
Well, let's see. The fact that I've only toured across the America very early this year from January. So, well, actually, I even like to explore some of the different, the various, the inclusiveness of some different theatrical arts practices, and for some accessibility or people with disabilities act as the audiences, but depending on some kind of the size of the venues, whether it's larger or even smaller, whilst being toured across America, especially New York or even Boston, and then even the smallest I can go to, the one at actually I went to called Stanford, the Stanford Stanford Arts Center at Stanford University in California, which is a pretty small space in which I've been intended to. So, well, actually, in the United States, actually they have some kind of arts and humanities accessibility checklist has been set by the National Endowment for the Arts. So even just simply, but there's some many accessibility.
You're cutting out a little bit, Michael. Do you mind going back to talking about the National Endowment for the Arts? Oh, we might have lost Michael. If you're there, Michael, let us know. Can you hear us? This is the joy. It's part of the fun. I mean, I can't wait to be back in a room together, but we try, right? It's important to have the conversation. Michael, if you can hear us, we will come back to you. Anybody else? Thoughts on trends? What are we doing? What are we doing right?
Oh, I was just going to say.
First?
Sure. I was just going to say, I think some of the things that we're doing right is there's funding that's going specifically to people with disability to be able to tell their stories. So Screen Australia, Screen New South Wales, I know, have got specific film funding just for those stories, and I think that's really important because one of the things, like Dan was saying earlier, like we don't have people with disabilities in the directing role, in that writing role, in that producing role. And I think the more of that we do, I think that can only be a positive thing. I think we are now actually starting to say, well, hold on, who has the right to tell these stories, rather than having very able-bodied people tell differently abled stories, So I think that's a really important question to have. who has the right to tell these intersectional stories. And I think that's really, really, really important. I think that's a great way forward. I think the other great thing is Instagram. I think that now with Instagram and social media, because you think about it, like back in 2010, we weren't really having these conversations, or if we were having them, they were happening in very small rooms. So it wasn't going out. So now with all these things that are happening across the world, someone will tweet about it, someone will Instagram about it, and boom, everyone has an opinion. And we get to hear voices that we don't normally listen to, because there might be a problem with how not being able to speak, not being able to communicate, but they are able to do this. And so we get to hear stories and get to hear opinions and viewpoints that we couldn't do 10 years ago. Well, hold on. When did I jump on Facebook? Facebook started in 2007 for me. So that's a lot. Like, that's not that long ago, but now every single person has a voice, and I think that's the best.
Absolutely. Sam, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just think that, you know, my involvement here in the arts community, you know, what we've experienced from now on, it's like it's been quite new. From before, we didn't have a clear understanding. And so I think that for myself, seeing how it's changed, but I think that the positives have been, it's been more clear, it's been more accessible, there's been more open conversation, there's been a lot more people involved in that conversation. But I think, you know, the trend, that sort of word in particular is a good word, but we all need to focus over the sort of human rights behind it rather than just a trend. Accessibility isn't a trend, it's a human right that we all should be privileged to have. So a trend, yeah, it's good, and we've got the progress and we are improving. But at the same time, I think that we really need to understand that, you know, it needs to happen fast. It can't just be a slow process. We need to work today. We need to get this done today and improving. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I think that idea of a seismic shift is what we need, because you know, we've already talked about this, but I think, you know, and I'm learning so much. I'll thank you all for being here while I can. Well, I'll say it probably several more times. But, you know, building in that it isn't a trend. It's not a phase. It's something that, you're so right, Sam. It's just, it's, I think that is a key takeaway, you know, for how we approach and discuss these types of topics and issues, because it's not going away. It's not, you know, and it wasn't always the case. We just are, you know, kind of only now, Anna, as you said, you know, public consciousness plays a huge role in influencing and determining, you know, action. And so action is where we're at, and meaningful action, right? Genuine representation is always the goal. So I think, yeah, I think that's great. Michael, can you hear us? Can we hear you? I see that you're back. You joined us again.
Yes.
Did you want to finish? You were talking about, we lost you around when you were talking about the National Endowment for the Arts. Did you want to? I'd love for you to finish your thought if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's my thoughts about where we have some adaptive or accessible technology. That's the most innovative way of making traditional arts and cultural programs available to the kind of larger audiences that include people with disabilities. So, well, the simply put through the live or even pre-caption recording. So I'm sure that they're definitely being applied to those, you know, the Austrian like Australian arts and cultural organizations and their companies, well, even to start, maybe someone take some professional disability equality training and access consultation, so to make sure we'll be able to equip themselves and make all those maybe from larger scale or even smaller scale venues like maybe the theatres or even the performing arts centres across Australia to a lot more have some kind of further community engagement, which, well, hopefully to make sure, well, people with disabilities, especially the wheelchair users, more accessible of entering such venues, as well as be able to hear and understood of what does the artists on stage able to deliver some powerful messages to the wider audiences. Yeah.
That's a great point. I think you're absolutely right. Dan, are you noticing any really positive change happening?
Yes and no. Is I like always win up, if I can be completely honest, in a sense that basically by even having and I love that statement that you said, Sam, this is not this is not just the in thing, the in topic of conversation. This is here forever and it has to be. But I will also say back to like little things that can be mentioned, like as I said, when I was saying that back to about allies, the best allies I'm talking in the performing arts, back to what I was saying before, allies that are asking us as individuals, as a group, what actually is required to make true accessible practice. Like I always give the example, and I'm fast, something that Mike was saying just a moment ago, early, when was it? Yeah, 2019, January of 2019. I was in New York on a directing residency at Atlantic Theatre Company. And it came to talk about my disability in some conversation. And I said to them, can I just ask you, I thought it was very great that you asked me what access requirements would I have, to take up the place. There was a look of absolute horror from the company who actually said to me, Dan, it was actually a particular form, we could say accessibility on that, but that's a different story. Anyway, but, saying basically what requirements did I, Dan Graham, need? And I was informed, as I said, they were in shock when they responded to me. That's a question they asked any employee, from someone working front of house to artistic director. And that's where I would like, basically, if theatre companies or performance arts, and we're talking performing arts here, are to do inclusivity, is basically ask what is needed. I agree that we need to tell them, but it should not just be left to us as artists, if that makes sense. I think a lot of it comes back to, like, as I said, with my Shakespeare development I've got. Luckily, I've got a wonderful relationship with Bill Shakespeare as an artist with a disability, as well as being an artist. I'm just saying, as someone asked me again, what do you want to be seen as, Dan? And I said, I just want to be seen as Dan Graham, which sounds very, very simple in concept, but it's not always the case. But with Bill Shakespeare, I always, and I've said this to the panel here before, when I actually did pitch this particular project to a number of theatre companies, the first question that one particular company asked me, what is my particular interest in disability? Because they couldn't even comprehend neurodiversity and disability. That was a bit too confusing, and I said what my disability that I actually identify as a neurodiversity. Someone who was interviewing me was in a position that I had met numerous times in a theatre social setting, not a film, but someone I knew. And the comment with a pause was, but you just seen it so normal, Dan. How's that possible? It was my job, as I saw it, to keep calm, collected, and not show that I was literally bleeding inside, that basically, how am I perceived? Like, I always people do know me, I do acknowledge disability or otherwise. I can be seen as different, as I like to say, different in a good way. But, how basically do we get past that kind of, and I think we're beating up, here it is, in this part here. Discrimination can be twofold. It can be inadvertently, you know, said to your face, and everyone here, I'm sure, has experienced that one way or another, or it can be not being said, like, I have been informed by a number of people in the industry, actually mentors of mine, who know me as Dan, first of all, but I have a disability, who've said to me just straight out, and it's something we mentioned just a moment ago, Dan, you know you should be further along in your career than you are. But unfortunately, people see the disability, and yes, disability is part of my identity, as I said, and I'm very proud of that part of my identity, but it shouldn't be, and I've even said this before, I'm happy people to disagree here. I can't think of a better word at the moment, but even the word disability has connotations to me at times. And I basically, and I'm seeing Ana Maria smiling and nodding, so I love her to reiterate or confirm what I'm saying there. Like, how do we get basically discrimination can be not just be acknowledged, like it's that famous thing, like, do we just put it under the bed and we just forget about it? And to me, that's as much discrimination as not being given an opportunity, if that makes sense. And that's my personal perspective on that. And Marie, see you smiling?
No, I was actually going to say that before. I think the word disability itself, I'll wait for interpreter.
Right.
Yeah. I think the word disability in itself has so many issues. And, you know, I was having a conversation with somebody who's used the word differently abled. And I went, oh, I love that, because everyone's differently abled. And I just went, okay, all right, we need a new word, because I don't like the word hard of hearing, and I don't like the word hearing impaired. And like, I don't like those words. That something's missing, you know. And I think there's something I thought about, and look, this is completely just my opinion based on my experiences, and I'm not trying to be an activist or anything like that, but there's something I've noticed that with some able-bodied people, when they're having to deal with people that are differently abled, that it's almost, there's a trauma there for them. There's a trauma for them in that, don't want to upset them, don't want to do, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to do this. And I feel that I feel like we need to change the wording. And I do think it goes back to the label. And I do think it goes back to how we test for autism, how we test for deafness, how we test for any of these things. Because when they test it, it's, this person can't do this, they can't do this, they can't do this. No one's actually having the conversation about, but what can they do? So, you know, I think that is gone. I think that is now gone. So the whole, I feel like the whole word disability, with it comes this whole thing of, oh, well, they won't be able to do this, or they won't be able to do this. And I feel like if we can, God, can we change it? Look, God, I wish we could. But I do think there needs to be a sense of, I don't know, I guess releasing that trauma for able-bodied people and going, you can actually have a conversation with us. And if you do say, what do you need? Like, honestly, when you think about it, big rock stars go in to do a performance and they get a rider. Like, they are able to go, I need in my dressing room only green jelly beans in that thing, or a fridge full of vodka. You know, that's the same thing. You know, that is the exact same thing. I'm going to ask for green jelly beans, but I also want to ask for all the other things that I need. So why can't we look at it as, you know, what a differently abled rider is, rather than what can't you do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I will say, back to, in terms of overseas context, I think it's very interesting to note, and this has just been my experience when I was younger, Ana Maria, and people look at me may have a smile when I say this. I used to do competitive swimming for the disabled in my teenage years. And as I was leaving it, one of the things that made me decide to leave, amongst many things, was basically I saw the deaf community basically didn't want to be put into the one grouping of disability. Does that make sense?
Yep, the deaf community did not want to be put into that.
It didn't want to be put in a disability at that time. I don't know what it's like now. I'm not some expert, but they did not want to be put in a disability grouping, which is funny that when I was in the UK for this fellowship, because obviously my interest and my personal connection is neurodiversity, I spoke to so many people in the performing arts as well as artists with neurodiversity who said to me, even in the UK and the US, there is this separation that people with neurodiversity want to take themselves off the label of disability. Just what we were saying, that it has the connotations of something is wrong. And I saw that Christy made that comment, you know, who we both know, you know, that basically what is wrong with it. You know, like I'm not being flippant when I say this. I can't tie my shoelaces, but I can direct a play by Howard Pinter. You know what I mean? So I think it's trying to get to that funny thing is that basically I think it does have to be this kind of consultation. And as you said, people, inverted commas, with a disability in the performing arts, and us as individuals ourselves, as artists with a disability, deaf, hard of hearing, are going to stuff up. I much prefer us to stuff up for, say, 10 years and then get it on track, than literally go all around the garden path. And basically, as I said always with Sam, that Sam had a lot of the same experiences when he, in his context, that I had when I was his age. And I'm not calling myself old, but you know what I'm saying, you know. And it's like, we can't just, I can't think of a word to say, but pussyfoot around a situation, you know, like. And I think this is a funny thing, like, I've always say with my advocacy, my personal advocacy work, I think what the people that do respond to the message I try to promote is when I say to them that you have, let's say neurodiversity here in this instance, you have two artists with neurodiversity. You are going to have two different people. It's not just one image, you know, go to the next one, you know, so yeah.
If I can add something, please, Brandon.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Sam, I one thing I did want to bring up that I whether you talk about this or not, but you know, we've talked a lot about, Dan just mentioned labels, and you know, we've talked about intersectionality and how I think within this conversation about accessibility, you know, it extends to, you know, we here tonight are represented by intersections of you know, accessibility and the LGBTQ plus community, accessibility and people of color, in First Nations individuals and disabilities. So, you know, in terms of that idea of labels, Sam, I know that you address this in Sam I Am, but I would love to hear your thoughts about, you know, how do you bring communities together?
I did just want to clarify something before that, Brandon. The deaf community is looking at me tonight. I don't know if they are, but the deaf community doesn't want the label of disability, and I understand that. Historically, it's been like that as well. They like to be referred as a culturally and linguistically diverse group. But I do want to bring up, for everyone that's here tonight as well, I am so extremely proud to identify as someone with a disability, because the disability community is such a powerful, resilient, strong, hardworking community that is so connected. And they're also the most inclusive community I have ever been in my life. I think we all need to really advocate to show that disabilities is a positive, it's a good thing. And I understand there's obviously the historical connection of negativity towards disability and the word disability, but we also need to change how everyone sees the disabled community and looks at us in a way. So if we change that perspective, it means we can kind of change to interableism community as well. We can change that idea. We can kind of change that perspective if we change everyone else's perspective about the disability community. Well, that's my perspective. And I think also with intersectionality, and people with different identities, I think it's really important to acknowledge that everyone has their own identities, whether it's a strong identity or it's still not yet built up yet. If they don't have one as strong as others, that's okay. I know for myself, I acknowledge my identity as being a deaf or hard of hearing white gay man. That is my identity, meaning as a white man, I know that I have privileges and there's things I need to accept and things I need to advocate for other people out there as well, because I know that I have privilege within my identity. So I understand that now, you know, we are lucky to have people of colour involved as well, but we all need to really, we need to use our platforms to include more people of colour, people of different backgrounds, to really strengthen that intersectionality community and that identity in the world. I'm interested to hear if Michael, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that or not? I'm just curious. I would love to hear your opinion.
Well, even the ableism is some kind of a universal term in which, well, actually just simply, well, be able to, whether it's the word disability or even the ableism, it will be a more appropriate how to treat someone who's been looked so differently towards one after another. But the fact actually just simply labeling around was really, well, actually been too discriminatory, even in the fact that makes someone feel so uncomfortable, and then makes you, well, actually simply makes someone feel have a bit of sense of some kind of insecurity, which were actually just simply even walking down the streets and actually just simply walking out and see how might people react to you, in the fact that given there's some kind of friction which, well, actually just simply whether or not they will feel so, have a sense of welcoming and then being so included to themselves, actually just simply, well, even most artists with disability have been seen to be so, you know, overlooked in all those, the right variety of the performances or auditions and everything. So, well, to, well, put into perspective in which, well, even just try to, well, reevaluate the innovative ways and just simply a new way of thinking, you know, forward and positive thinking, which will help you able to react those people with disabilities, and especially within that arena, arts arena, even in the fact that to see how to do treatment like that.
So we're very near the end of our time together. We had some other questions that we didn't get to, unfortunately, but I did want to just end. This has come up already tonight, but I did want to sort of end on this thought, because I think it's something that we as a company, it aligns with sort of how we want to be approaching our how we're building our approach to accessibility. And it revolves around the recent trailer for a new movie written and directed by Sia, which was released, in which a nonverbal autistic character is played by a non-disabled actor. And in response, the actor, Mickey Rowe, wrote, "The point of storytelling is to connect us with people we otherwise wouldn't come in contact with, to bring us life experiences we don't already have. That is why diversity in the arts matters. Inclusion in the arts matters because it leads to inclusion in life."
Yep.
Does anybody have thoughts in the last few minutes?
Can I just clarify who said that? What you just quoted out there, Brandon? Who said
the actor
that?
Mickey Rowe, Rowe, R-O-W-E. He was the first autistic actor to play the lead role in the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night team. But just that.
Oh, I thought maybe Dan, you've already discussed it, but obviously you might have some more input about. You want to speak some more about that?
Basically, just what Mickey said, and knowing Mickey again, talking about technology and pre-Facebook, this wouldn't have been possible. I've actually been in contact with Mickey through Facebook in the past, you know, and a lot of what he brings is just what we're saying, that we just want, there are, and what we said before, there are stories that, and I know I'm repeating myself, but stories that haven't been told, and if you can make them authentic in a true sense, and as we have this whole discussion in the business, we see it, like, I think what upset people, particularly in that instance, was Sear's response, if that makes sense. I think that's what hurt people more. That basically, as I said, we are not saying, I hate saying we, but I'm not saying, you know, that you're not going to make a mistake. Fine. But, and I have, obviously this has been in consciousness all week, particularly in my role at MEAA, as well as being an artist with a disability, and she made a comment like she had cast someone with who on a spectrum, you know, but it became difficult. That's when you, as I said, back to what I said, yes, Vince will be difficult. Yes, and I will say this, Brendan, if I can say this on the same lines. Not, and I've said this, I keep saying this, not everyone with a disability is going to want to be in the performing arts, nor is not every non-disabled person going to be wanting a career in the performing arts. I always make the joke, my mum always, who's been my biggest supporter, obviously, she always said to me, I always told you to follow your dreams, and in terms of career, you're going to be at it a long time. She now says to me, e.g., I'm calling from home at the moment, she always says to me, but I forgot to mention, you know, money. You know, if I wanted the easier route, disability or not, it wouldn't necessarily be the performing arts. And it's nothing to do with disability. But back to what Mickey has said, like, I think what, obviously, if we can, as I said, there are stories that are being told, and hopefully, and this is another consultation we haven't had time to discuss, my hope is that performing arts schools, film schools, etc., will have more artists with a disability. And I'm not mentioning names, but I know someone who's just been involved or accepted into drama schools with a disability. And my hope is basically these stories will be told, you know, and basically it will come from an authentic voice that basically, yes, we can work with those people who are, inverted commas, not disabled. And as I said to you from day one, I'm not going to align myself, despite being proud of my disability, I don't wish to just do disability theatre. And it's my personal choice, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but basically, but I just want to tell good stories. And I will say something to you here now, Sam, which I've never brought up with you. I think it's very funny. When my mum, who you met, came to see Sam I Am in its development of Brand X, she said to me, and maybe this is good or bad in my direction, she said she could see me in that production. You know, and basically I said, oh, what do you mean? It was Sam's show. It was Sam's show. She said, no, but you actually having the voice that, you know, I think, you know me well, Sam, so I hope I'm making a bit more sense than what I'm saying here, but yeah, so, yeah.
Can I add to that? Oh, sorry, Anna, after you. Absolutely, Anna, after you. No, it's all right. You, Anna.
I just want to say, like, in terms of the seer thing, okay, I have 2 points. Number one, her response was terrible, and that should never have happened. And I think that is the biggest issue that we are facing right now. We haven't seen this film. We don't know. We don't know what the story is. We don't know if somehow through the music, the person, you know, is no longer, you know, we don't know, like, we don't know what the story is. So we can't comment on that. All we've seen is the trailer, right? So like with the Eddie Redmayne playing the character in Stephen Hawking's in The Theory of Everything, how it started as an able-bodied, and we watched him move on into the Stephen Hawkings that we now know and love. But there was a journey for that actor, and I do understand why they got an able-bodied actor to then portray the entire journey. I get that. In the Sia situation, we don't know. All we've seen is the trailer, but my heart sank when I saw that trailer, because it is so important for every single person to be able to recognize themselves in art, be it on TV, be it on Instagram, be it in cinema, be it on stage. We need to see ourselves represented and portrayed. But my biggest thing, and this is something I will fight for forevermore, is that I don't just want to see a deaf person playing a deaf person, an autistic person playing an autistic person. I want to get to a point where their disability is not the storyline, that they can play the lead role. They can play the girl at the cafe who falls in love with the guy next door, that their disability is no longer a part of their character. When we're at that level, then I'll stop. But that's what I want. I want to be able to see actors who are differently abled being able to play a character that has got nothing to do with their different ability. I think that is the most important thing. And that's where we're not at. So to be able to go, okay, here is a role that was for an autistic person, not given to an autistic person, I have issues with that.
So I think I think it's funny that you were talking about
Sam, what you can go ahead and finish your thought, and then Michael will come to you next.
When you were talking before, Anna, about Stephen Hawking and the film with Eddie Redmayne, if an able person can play a person with disability, so why can't a person with a disability play an able-bodied person? Why can't it go both ways? So I think the role of the actor, has changed over time, and it will continue changing, because remember back in the day, we didn't have enough people to come in and play different roles, and now there's plenty of people out there that want to act, so there's really no excuse. We can get people differently able, we can get able-bodied people as well. So Sia and her response on Twitter, maybe you're a bad actor, is what she replied. Well, maybe you're a bad director, Sia, is what I think to that. As a director, it's your responsibility to make sure that the actors you have included are fantastic actors, and if you can't work with them, and if you can't work with an autistic person, then don't direct a movie about an autistic person. Simple as that, plain and simple. So I think now is the time that we really don't have any excuses. We have so many actors, differently abled or not. We have different ways of telling stories, so there's really no excuse anymore. We're really innovative nowadays. It's 2020. We have so much more creative thoughts and creative ways. I know the deaf community has had similar suffering as well. Sometimes in different situations where they brought in someone maybe who's not deaf to advocate for them. So we really need to now start, for example, like Sia had the opportunity to tell a real story that would have been a real benefit, and that also would have been real beneficial with her big platform that she has, to really bring in someone who is autistic, who has a disability, to play that role. But unfortunately, she didn't do that.
Michael, did you want to share a final thought?
Yeah, that's why the real challenge is that even the fact that just like that a non-disabled actor could possibly play some kind of maybe people with autism or maybe autistic role. So basically in a normal world, even the most Well, most of autistic individuals are simply non-verbal, or actually just having some kind of maybe social interaction or even communication difficulties. So that actually, if the non-actor have offered them some like the main role of playing people with autism, actually there's not much lines in the dialogue, has some kind of limited dialogue. So I mean, just what does it mean to them? Actually, we have been on. Put them into a spot on the scene, particular scenes in which will actually get a chance to have to react or even communicate with the other actors or even the leading actors or even something like that. So, well, actually, it's for just only maybe 1 or 2 sentences or even lines, and that's it. Even in the fact that some of the typical characteristics of autistic people, especially need to be some kind of living like that because of the social interaction barriers and everything. So that comes in the point of mine anyway. So it's not quite a lot in it being covered everything about that. Having some speech difficulties or even language barriers or something. Well, in contrast, so many TV drama series in Hong Kong where actually some actors have played some kind of maybe deaf people, even hearing impaired people, that actually affect they only just simply communicate to other actors in sign language or slang or something like that, but actually they can hear what they're saying in the dialogue. So yeah, there's one of the main differences in which whether or not taking some variety of disability roles in which portray those people with disability and really putting some kind of into the world of imagination. Yeah, the similar to what being applies in the real world.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that is what it's about. It's having the capacity to, you know, be able to enjoy. That's what we, you know, we do as artists is get to learn and grow and be able to adapt to the environment, because it is you know, we are so lucky to get to do what we do, and it should not be cut off from anyone for any reason. So I you know, the quote at the bottom I think is a great you know, way to sort of take us out of tonight. We have gone a little over time, so thank you for those of you that have stuck around. Thank you to all of our panelists. This was just incredible. I can't thank you enough. Sam, did you have a thought?
Can I just add one little tiny more thing? I really want to say a big thank you to Brandon for organising this event online tonight. And you've given us all the opportunity to really have an open and honest discussion altogether. You know, and you haven't brought in someone else to speak for us. We're doing the conversation. And at the same time, we feel really honoured and we feel really lucky to be on this panel. Anna, Dan, Michael, and myself, you know, we've had a really successful history in the arts, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we continue all those successes into the future. And, you know, put aside those privileges or use our privileges to advocate more in the future. We need to make the art community space more diverse, more inclusive, and more accessible for all people. That's our responsibility as people with disabilities as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all again so much to all of our panelists, Ana Maria Belo, Michael Chan, Daniel Graham, Sam Martin, to our interpreters, Marnie and Katie, to our producer who isn't with us tonight of Sam I Am, Andrew Lee, to the Clocktower Center and Moonee City Council for supporting the development of Sam I Am. You can go to their website to view an excerpt from of Sam himself performing a brief excerpt from the show, which we will be producing as part of Midsummer in April of 2021. So we're very excited. We hope that you'll join us for that. And thank you so much again for being with us tonight.
Brandon, can you please put Katie back on the screen for a quick goodbye?
Absolutely.
So full team, goodbye.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.